Welcome back to Bordeaux and another roundup of 2004 vintage. I'm currently going through the wines of Pauillac and I'm having the pleasure of tasting, well, nothing less than the famous Mouton Rothschild, Château Mouton Rothschild in 2004. Normally I find that when I talk about this vintage, I seriously consider 2004 being an underrated vintage. I really loved it from the beginning. Of course it's not as extreme as 03 or as intensely concentrated as 05, but I really do think that for lovers of fine claret, it's a beautiful vintage. And in my mind, Mouton Rothschild is always the most accessible of the first growth when it's young. This is not a contradiction, however, because it also ages extremely well. But I always recognize this by those lovely roasted notes. This is just like, you know, roasted coffee beans, fresh espresso. When you put your nose in it, then we can add that dimension of really inky, dark and ripe fruit with a fine touch of leather, and some really floral notes. It's a great purity. It's a really fine, and despite all of that richness and that ripeness, it's a fine notion of minerality and stoniness there as well. And I really think that Mouton made a beautiful 2004. This concentration is really, you know, ample, perhaps the fullest in terms of fullness of the Premier Cru from 04. Extremely multi-layered with plenty of dark fruit, really, you know, underlined by a fine touch of oak, which is adding a hint of spiciness. Already very silky in terms of, you know, on the tannins, with a really long finish. A very pleasurable wine to drink from, well, actually today, you know, becoming 20 years, unless you want to wait for much longer. But a successful result, and I think a very nice vintage, very typical for Mouton Rothschild.